Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and tonight is open mic night, which means that it's your opportunities to submit a question through to me and see if you can stump the guru. Now, I run the open mic sessions on the first Sunday of every single month, and if you would like to submit a question, then you need to click on the links below. So propdev.info/open-mic, and if you do that, the questions will come through to me. I'll be able to do any preparation that I need to do in order to get ready for the session, and then we'll see whether or not you can indeed stump the guru. So that said, got a bucket load of questions today, and I'm going to see what I can do to help you, I guess, navigate through your property development journey. Now, first question comes from Adrian. So Adrian asks, when using national property data, how do you get a map view to view all the splitters in your chosen area? I can get it to do a list view, but not a map view. So Adrian, very, very good question, but there's a couple of little questions prior to the main question. So I'm just going to help that out. So firstly, what is national property data? It is a sales research tool that helps you understand, I guess, the best price to buy a site for and the best price to sell a finished product for. It is a competitor to RP Data and Price Finder, but has a lot more flexibility with regards to the kinds of searches that it can actually do, and is aimed at not just real estate agents, which RP Data is, but it's also aimed at developers, valuers, real estate agents, finance people, and a whole bunch more, and get very, very creative with some of the searches. One of those searches, as you said, is the ability to search for splitter block. To the best of my knowledge, it is the only tool out there that you can actually search for splitter blocks. So I guess that's what national property data is. Now, the next part is, what's a splitter block? So a splitter block is something that is on one title, but with multiple lots. It could be 2, 3, 4, 5 lots that's actually sitting there. Now, that is a splitter block. Now, a splitter block, because it's got multiple lots on the title already, it is a pre-approval to separate those out into individual titles. That means you don't need to go get development approval in order to do that, but rather you're going to go to the state government and ask the state government to just lift the titles or split the title, as it's actually called. Don't be confused. This is very different to a subdivision where you need to put an actual lodged application in through to council. So there's a whole bunch of differences. So firstly, the timeline typically only takes 5 to 10 days to actually get your titles out. Also the process, you lodge to the state government to do a split, whereas you lodge to the local government in order to do a subdivision, and also the costs. So splitter tends to be somewhere in the vicinity of $300 to $500 to separate the titles, whereas the development application could be anywhere from $20,000 through to $90,000 in order to lodge and get the approval to actually do the subdivision itself. So it can be quite onerous to actually go down the subdivision path. Now, that said, all of that pre-framing then was, how do you actually get to search for the splitters? And in your instance, you could see them on list view, but you weren't able to see them on the map view. So there's one little tip that I'm going to show you. So I'm going to navigate this through for absolutely everybody. So firstly, here is a screen share. And also I thought while I do this, there is a link to, I guess, the National Property Data website. It's actually nationalpropertygroup.com.au. Now, as a member of our community, you automatically get a 10% discount, okay? Automatically get a 10% discount on that. If you are an annual member, then if you go to our shop and are logged in as the annual member, then there will be a secret button that actually turns up that will actually give you a 20% discount. So if you aren't already an annual member, just becoming an annual member with all the other discount suppliers we get and that sort of thing, this one alone will actually fund, the discount will actually pretty much go to fund the annual membership for the entire year. So pretty good deal. Okay, that said, let's see how we can actually use the tool. So I'm doing this on another screen over here, so forgive me for not looking directly at the camera while we're actually doing this. So a lot of people think splitter blocks exist only in Southeast Queensland, but they exist all the way around the country, folks. As a matter of fact, I've shown many places where in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Adelaide, in Perth, where there are suburbs with literally hundreds of these things, folks. So now I'm not going to show you all of them everywhere. I don't want to reveal all the secrets, but I'm going to show you one in New South Wales as an example. So I'm going to choose the suburb of Ryde, one of my favorite suburbs to choose because it's simple to type, okay? More filters, I'm going to come down here and under plan information, I'm just going to say I want 2 or more lots. Okay. Now, so we don't want one title, we want 2 or more lots. Okay. And the most important part is this one here. So non-strata, because you can have 2 lots in a townhouse complex or an apartment complex. What we want is a non-strata, which means that it's a house block. So we want 2 or more non-strata. I'm going to make sure that the location is New South Wales because I've been searching all the way around the country doing other deals. Click on search, and this is going to go hunt for all the splitter blocks in that particular area. And here we go, folks. We've got 417 of these that have actually loaded up. Okay. Now this is it in list view. And Adrian, to your question, you could see how to do this on list view. We also have grid view. So grid view would actually break these down and give you a little bit of a summary view. And we also have map view. Now the problem with map view and hence your question is the map doesn't know what you want to show on the map. So you need to tell the map view what you want to do. So we can select individual properties that we would like to put on that map, for example, on this left-hand side here, then click map view, and those individual properties will then turn up on the map. If you would like to see all the splitters all in one go, then click on this one here, and all of them will actually get ticked. Then when we go to map view, it will then go, it'll take like a couple of seconds to load this up because there's quite a bit of data it's trying to gather. But while it's doing that, here we go, there we are, all the pin drops sitting on the map. And then what we can do is we can then start to scroll all the way in. Now, a splitter block, folks, as I touched on before, is multiple lots on a single title. Okay, not every instance will that second lot be an actual usable lot. Okay, sometimes they're very skinny, sometimes they're at funny angles, all sorts of things like that, but it is actually showing them. So I'm going to come all the way in here and I'm going to give you some examples of, I guess, a good one and a bad one. So this is a typical one right here. So you can see we've got a dwelling that's actually crossing the line, the split down the center. So you've actually got the 2 lots. Now, if we wanted to separate these 2 titles, legally we could do that, but the dwelling would be in the way. So we would actually have to demolish that particular property in order to unlock the 2 lots, but legally able to actually do that. Now, it's not centered. We might want to do a boundary relocation. That would require a development application. But if we wanted to split it as is, where is, then we could. Now, next door is also on 2 lots, but have a look at this one. It's a super skinny lot. That is not ideal. Okay, so that's not really going to create something usable. Again, we could do a boundary realignment. We might be able to relocate that line a little bit more to the center here. That might be worthwhile. But again, that is a development application to do the boundary realignment, also called a reconfiguration of lot. Now, there's another one that's this one here, which is what is called a unicorn. Now, a unicorn means that the house is perfectly located within the boundary of the block, which means that if you separate the title, you don't need to do any work at all, and you maintain the entire intrinsic value of the house in its entirety. And you instead get a vacant block of land plus a brand spanking new house. So that, folks, is a unicorn, and they do exist. Just proof point that they do, and proof that these things do exist in other states other than Southeast Queensland. So hope you got plenty out of that, Adrian. Now back to the questions. Next one comes from Andy. Andy says, as a money partner, what is the best level of security you can request when loaning money to a developer? Andy, that's a really good question. And I have to be cautious here because I'm not allowed to give legal, accounting, or financial advice, okay? But so I'm going to try and just broaden it out a little bit in what it is that you're actually looking for. So firstly, as a money partner looking to go into any deal, my candor to you is to be super careful to actually understand that you know whether or not it's actually a deal. I have never, ever, ever seen any developer who is asking for money give you an information memorandum or a feasibility that says his deal is going to not make money. Every single one of them says they're going to make money. But we all know that there are risks in this, and it doesn't necessarily pan out as we would like. And so how do you tell whether or not that's actually a good deal or not? Well, the onus is on you as the investor to be able to do the research to actually understand whether or not it's a good deal. Now, in order to do that, there are two elements that you want to get really, really good at. So you need to get very good at your site analysis. Can you identify every single issue or challenge that is actually going to turn up on the site? And then secondly, you're going to identify the sales research. What should you be buying it for? What should you be selling it for? Then a feasibility is really the adding and subtracting of those two elements together. So what we're looking for in that feasibility is, did they get their purchase price right? Did they get their sale price right? And did they identify every single issue and challenge on the site? And if so, there should be a line item in the feasibility to say that they've accounted for that. So if they've done that, okay, then and only then should you consider whether or not, you want to invest in that deal. Plus, there's a few things that you want to look at with regards to, are they a good personality? Have you got good personality fits? What security you've got, hence your question, a whole bunch more, okay? Now, many ways that you can lend money into a deal, okay? And depending upon what purpose you're lending the money in for and what level of security is on offer, that will ratchet the interest rate that you're actually going to pay. So there is a thing called the capital stack. I'm going to highly recommend that you do some research on that. I might even do another session at some point in the future just talking about the capital stack. The capital stack is talking about where in the stack does your cash sit and how close is it to the risk factor of the deal. Okay, now a typical loan from just a normal everyday bank will have a deposit, and it will then have some debt. Okay, so the deposit sometimes, if we're using commercial terms, will actually be known as equity, and the loan will be known as debt. Okay, so I'm going to talk about equity and debt here so that you actually understand how a commercial lender is actually going to be looking at this. If we're doing developments, chances are they're going to be using commercial terms. Okay, now the debt, typically you're going to have a senior debt person, so a bank, most likely. They will have first mortgage. Okay, so first mortgage means that they have the most amount of security, and should something go wrong, they get paid first. Okay, anything after that is left over then would go to someone who has a second mortgage. So a second mortgage clearly comes behind the first. So the first mortgagee gets paid first, second mortgagee gets paid second, and if there is such a thing as a third mortgage, then they would get paid third, and so down the food chain until there's no money left. Okay, now once you get past a second mortgage, the level of security on a third mortgage or fourth mortgage is kind of diluted somewhat. So people tend to not use that. Okay, so mortgage though allows you to actually call in the loan and actually sell down the property in order to get your debt. Get your cash back. Okay, so if there's not enough cash or deemed to be not enough cash or the potential for that, then you're taking a higher risk position in the process. And so it might be that you want to have a secondary level of security. So a secondary level of security might be something like a caveat. Now, a caveat stops you from stops the landowner from selling the property without your knowledge and consent. Okay, it puts a black mark against the title, and anyone dealing with that title needs to come and get your permission in order to remove that. So that is a caveat. So mortgage allows you to sell it. Caveat stops them from selling it. Now, a caveat can sit there for many, many years, and you have no power to call in the loan, but it does stop them from doing it. So eventually, at some point when they go to sell, that one would actually get called in. Then you have the next level, which would be a personal guarantee. So personal guarantee says that the developer that you're actually lending the money to may not necessarily have the cash in this particular deal, but across the rest of their assets and liabilities, they're giving you a personal promise that, hey, I'm really good for this. I'm going to sell some other assets in order to come in and make good on any losses that you may actually incur. Okay, then there's also a charge against the development entity itself. So you can actually put, similar to, a mortgage of sorts, but against the company that is the development entity, and you may be able to put a claim against the company. Okay, so not many people tend to use that one, but know that it does actually sit there. Now, as you go up the stack, so is your second mortgage, then as your caveat, then as your personal guarantee. As you go up the stack, you're getting closer and closer and closer to the equity that's contained within the deal before the profit actually occurs. So if there is no profit in the deal, then the first one who actually is likely to get hit is the least protected person. Okay, least protected person has no security at all, so they just lent it because they thought he was a nice guy. So that person would be an unsecured creditor. They would only get paid if all of the secured creditors have actually been dealt with first. So they're going to get last. Okay, so make sure that you have some security firstly. Second thing, so the first person would be the first mortgagee, second person would second mortgagee, third person would be, I guess, anyone that's holding a caveat that's sitting over the property because I guess as they're starting to sell things down, and the last one would be any personal guarantees. And so super last, I should say, would then be any unsecured creditors if there's any money left over. So just understand how far up the stack you actually are. And if you are higher up the stack, you should be asking for higher and higher interest rates. Now, what's a valid interest rate? These vary. I have seen interest rates paid anywhere from 8% all the way through to 30%, depending upon how high up the stack you are, depending upon how much money you've actually got in the deal, depending upon how risky the deal is, depending upon how much skill and experience the developer has. So what is the number? Well, how long is a piece of string? So be very, very careful on that. It's probably one of those things where you need to look at this on a case-by-case basis, understand whether or not that person has actually done a deal before. That doesn't mean you don't lend to them because everyone has to do deal number one, but it means that you're taking a higher risk position. So if you're taking a higher risk position, then you want to take a higher reward, okay? So understand that element. Anyway, hope that helps. Next question comes from Louise. So Louise says, on a standard HIA contract, is it reasonable for a builder to ask for a 20% progress payment at base stage, or is this front loaded? Builder says that there's no industry standard. Is that correct? Look, there actually is a pseudo standard, for want of a better word, Louise. So 20% at the base stage is on the high side. Okay, so typically what I tend to see out there would be for deposit, typically 10%. For the base stage, which is the area that you're asking, typically 10%. Now they're asking 20% at this point in time. For the frame, that would typically be about 20%. For the enclosed, okay, so at lockup, that is typically 25%. Fixing would be 20, and final would be 15. That's what most HIA contracts actually ask for. Now, I have a problem with how that is actually framed, though. No pun intended with frame stage. Because the final payment of 15% has not dealt with the fact that there might be minor defects, okay? And at this stage, you've paid 100% of all of the cash all the way through, and there's going to be some minor defects. There's no incentive for the builder to come back anymore. So me personally, I always try to negotiate that final stage is not 15%, but is rather 10. And I try to say, I'm going to hold back 5% in order to, I guess, deal with minor defects. And I put a condition in there that says, once you've told me that you're actually at final stage, within 1 week of actual occupation certificate being issued, we will get a building certifier out there to actually assess the entire property and come up with a list of minor defects. And that minor defects list is then given to the builder within a week of them actually giving us the occupation certificate. And that builder can then rectify that. And then once they do, we release the extra 5%. That's how I tend to do it, okay? Hoping that you get some benefit out of that. That way you're incentivizing the builder to do a good job, minimize the number of minor defects, and get his final payment as quick as humanly possible. Very good. Next question comes from Paul. Paul says, a question for Brisbaneites. How do we get Brisbane City Council to assess the value of a street tree, please? I understand there's a team who can advise on this matter before we talk to Council's planning team. Actually, Paul, this is a bigger question for all councils everywhere. And so I'm going to answer it in that context, and then I will try to drill into your team, your particular circumstances with Brisbane. So basically, if it's a street tree, by default, it is a council-owned asset. And so they have an asset team that actually look after that. That's the team that you actually want to talk to. So I guess the The road is an asset, bus stops are an asset, trees are an asset. So every single tree will have a serial number that allocated in a database where they know what tree, what species, when it was planted, all those sorts of things, and the health of that tree, because they do go through a process of I guess looking after those assets and making sure that they're maintained and that sort of thing. So because of that, you need to talk to the asset management team in order to do that. Now, what I would suggest would be that you lodge a pre-lodgement meeting, or in some states it's called a pre-application meeting or a pre-app with council, and say, look, this is the intention of what we're actually trying to do here. We're trying to put a driveway in the exact location that this tree is. Is there an opportunity to either relocate the tree, or is there an opportunity to potentially delete the tree? Now, whatever the outcome, council will make you pay. So if they are going to relocate it, they'll get you to pay for the, I guess, deletion of the original tree and the reinstatement of a new tree of a similar size and shape. And they will locate that, I guess, somewhere around, I guess, the area, based on where they feel that it would be best located now that it doesn't live in its current home. Okay, so that you're going to pay for the cost of deletion and the cost of a replacement tree. Now, if that tree is very big and very mature, that cost can actually be quite significant. So just bear that in mind. Okay. If it's not a council-owned tree, then you still want to go through and actually talk to, I guess, their planning team and ask them, are there any other protected trees on site? Okay, so sometimes in some councils, every tree on site is protected by default, and you need to get permission in order to remove any tree. In other councils, every tree is not protected unless specifically stated otherwise. So anyway, hope that helps. And I guess moving on to the next question. Jumo says, I'm looking for a sample contract of sale for delayed settlement with early access. Well, I can't give you a sample contract, but I can give you some insights into what to do. Trying to understand what's the difference with a standard contract. Can anyone help, please? Okay, so what I understand, because I know Jumo quite well, so I might frame this question a little bit broader so that everybody actually tries to understand what's happening here. So they want to have a delayed settlement with early access, the ability to go on site and do any investigative works and potentially even any construction works once they've got the appropriate approvals in place. So in order to do that, you would need to have some special conditions in the contract that actually state your intentions as to some of the things that you actually want to do. So for example, do you need to knock down and replace fences? Do you need to remove some individual trees? Do you need to dig up and install a sewer or a stormwater or a driveway? Those sorts of things. Start listing out the kinds of impositions that you're actually going to be having on the property. What we don't want is a single sentence that actually says, hey, we want to commence works, because that doesn't give the owner any understanding of what's going to happen, how long it's going to be, how that's going to impact their world, that sort of stuff. Instead, when we start listing out, hey, these are the implications, we can then have a quality conversation with them. That quality conversation is going to give them some comfort level, what you're doing, when you're doing it, how long they're actually going to be imposed by, that sort of thing. And then when you actually go to do the work, knock down the tree or delete the shed in the backyard, those sorts of things, then they're not suddenly caught off guard and wondering what the heck just happened. Anyway, hope that helps. Quer says, we're looking to acquire combined sites suitable for 10 townhouses. So by combined sites, I'm assuming this is 2 adjacent properties. We've been able to find only one site, and we're struggling to get sellers either side to agree. What is the process for acquiring both sites within a similar time frame, say 3 to 6 months? Okay. Would it be possible to land bank one site first? So we've got many questions within here, Quer. So let me see if I can break this down. So firstly, okay, if we need to amalgamate sites, you need to be able to understand whether or not a single site all by itself is going to be profitable in isolation. That is super important to actually understand, because if the deal only makes sense if you combine them together, then you need to structure the deal specifically to do that, because you don't want to get caught land banking something, because you may never get the opportunity to buy the one next door, because you don't know when they're going to when they're going to move out, when they're going to want to sell, when they're going to die, all those sorts of things. You could be land banking that for many, 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 many years. So you need to do what they call a simultaneous settlement clause. Simultaneous settlement clause says, hey, this contract is subject to the fact that I also want to buy the guy next door, okay? And both contracts are going to be dependent on each other. And if we can't do both, then we are going to do neither, okay? So if your deal needs both to happen, then you need to have that simultaneous settlement clause in there. If the deal stands up all by itself, so let's just say, in your instance, you wanted to do 10 townhouses, but let's just say you by itself, you might be able to get 4 on one side and 4 on the other side, but when you combine them together, you get your 10 because you get some economies of scale. Does it make sense at doing the 4 townhouses? If it does, then there's no reason why you couldn't actually grab the property and execute the deal, okay? And then you're just going to get an upside if you, acquire the second property. Now, my guidance on this, okay, never, ever, ever try to acquire the property on the corner first, okay? Because then there's only one way to go, so that you can go to the left or the right if they were not on the corner, but because they're on the corner, you may only be able to go to the left, which means that the person on the left now has you over a barrel. They know that you need their property. But if you had have gone somewhere in the middle of the street first, now you've got someone on the left and someone on the right. So when you start your negotiations, you can negotiate with both of them, and you don't need either one. You only need one. And so you're going to rely on the fact that one of them is going to need to sell more than the other one, and they're going to be fair and reasonable in that process, okay? And that's typical, and neither of them are going to be unreasonable in their approach because of the fact that they know that you may not transact their deal if they are unreasonable. You may transact the other person's deal. So it's a little bit of a motivation for them to actually play fair in that space, okay? Hoping that helps. Was there any other part of that question that I've missed? Would it be possible to land bank one site first? Yes, it is possible. But as property developers, we make money by flipping the deal as quick as humanly possible. So holding on to that and land banking just ties up our resources. It means that we can't do another deal. So it's probably not the most intelligent investment decision. But yes, you could actually do that if that was the case. Okay, next question. I can't quite make out the name on this particular person, so my humble apologies on that. I have a question regarding how long do people believe it would take to achieve a $3 million after-tax profit if one goes to full-time property developing starting from scratch? Is a 5-year timeline too short, or should it be 10 years more realistic? So firstly, and I wish there was a name here. It's a bit hard to talk to without a name. I want to be very, very clear. Property development is not a get-rich-quick scheme, okay? It is possible to make crazy amounts of money, but in doing so, you have to factor in the risk element of actually trying to do those sort of deals in a super short timeline when you don't yet know what you're doing. If you're starting from scratch, my guidance and my candor to you is to start on a small deal first. Start to build up the skills. It is, after all, you are learning a new trade, okay? And in the next couple of days, I'm going to be announcing a free course that's going to give you the insights on some of the things to actually look out for on this. So be mindful of that free course coming soon. As a matter of fact, we're going to be launching it in the next couple of days. So be very, very mindful of that. Now, that said, the timeline at 3 mil, okay? 3 mil cash means that by the time you pay your GST and by the time you pay your company tax, you're realistically probably going to be needing to make about $4.5, maybe even $5 million, depending upon the kind of deal that you're actually trying to do. But that level of cash, whilst achievable, is probably the wrong way to actually be looking at it, because when you actually get pure hard cash, it means that you've had to sell down the properties in order to get there. So you've had to sell down a whole bunch of stuff to pay someone else some tax in order for you to keep. Instead, I'd be looking at what would it take to get $3 million worth of equity in stock that I'm actually able to hold and not sell it? Okay. And by not selling it, then you're able to keep the property over a long period of time, and it's going to grow with the market like every other investment property. So the rhetoric is every 7 to 10 years it's going to double in value. So if you've got $3 million worth of profitable properties that you held, in 10 years time, that will be 6 million, okay, give or take. Now, also, if you own $3 million worth of equity, it would be very, very positively geared, which means that it's going to generate a cash flow for you, which is way more important than cash. Cash flow means that you're going to keep getting paid over and over and over again. Okay, and in doing that, I guess the key thing is don't sell the finished product. Now, if you don't sell the finished product, you don't realize the cash. And if you don't realize the cash, then you don't yet pay tax. At some point in the future, you will sell that property, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years time. At that point, you'll realize the profit, and at that point, you pay the tax. But if it's owned outright and positively geared, that is 100% of your profits that stay in the deal. Super important to actually know that. Now, how do you get to keep one? Many of us are actually tempted to keep really small deals. We might do a 1 into 2 subdivision or a duplex, and we go, I want to keep one of those. The problem is that you then hold on to a lot of debt. Okay, and a lot of debt, especially in periods like now where we've got very high interest rates, means that you go into a negative cash flow position, which is not real cool. So in the early days, you may need to flip some deals, cash in, pay the tax, that sort of thing. But what we want to do is we want to scale the deals until such time as we can actually keep the profits at the end. Okay. Now, in order to do that, there is a magic number of 6. Okay. And that is based on the fact that all of us as property developers are aiming for a 20% profit on cost. Now, when we aim for a 20% profit on cost, if we use the magic number of 6, if we sell down 5, it pays the cost, which means that the 6th one is owned free and clear. Now, if we do that, it won't take long to acquire, I guess, $3 million worth of assets very, very quickly. Now, if you own a property in Southeast Queensland, in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Adelaide, you're going to be generating somewhere between $25,000 and $30,000 passive income per property that you actually keep. So you might, you'd be able to keep an asset that's probably in the vicinity of $1 million anyway, and generating, let's just say $30,000 cash flow. So what you want is 3 properties in order to generate, let's just say somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 positive income per year. That would give you your $3 million worth of assets. And it is very, very, very achievable to do that within 5 years if you know what you're doing, if you have a structured plan and you actually put that in place. So, and the plan is, well, how do I learn how to do 6? Or in order to learn how to do 6, you probably need to learn how to do 4 first. And in order to learn how to do 4, you probably need to learn how to do 2. So you want to build yourself a roadmap of projects that says, how do I start small, learn the skills, start to step up, and within just a couple of projects, you are potentially in a position where you can actually keep assets owned outright. So can it be done in 5 years? The answer is absolutely categorically yes, if you keep your assets and you keep the cash flow going. If you want to cash in, and if you want it as cash, it's probably going to be closer to 7 or 8 years in order to get that level of cash, just because you're going to pay so much tax in that process. Plus, you won't get the benefit of the ongoing positive revenue. Wow, that was a big answer. If only I had a name there. So that's disappointing. We don't have a name. Next question, Martin. Martin says, my first Torrens title duplex development. Now, Torrens title, folks, is another word for freehold title. Okay, will be finished in a couple of months. Very pleased with that, given all the dramas that I've had with the project. Okay, very good. But I want to make sure I can get the occupation and subdivision certificates without too much drama. Any suggestions or tips, items that could cause issues, holdups, etc.? Martin, that is a fantastic question. Okay, so there's a couple of steps in the process. Okay, goes by slightly different names in every state, but the process is called plan sealing. So before you get the titles issued from the titles office, you need council to approve that and confirm that you've met all of the development approval conditions that they gave you in the original development approval in the first place. they might have given you 50 conditions on their DA approval. You need to demonstrate to council that all of those 50 items have been met. So what you need to do is review all 50 and make sure you've got something that as a proof point, as a checkpoint that you've actually complied. So there's a whole bunch of things that are going to be sitting in there that will do that. And so you've got to look at, tick in the box on all the ones that you've actually gone and achieved and collect some evidence on that. So what I tend to do, I tend to get a copy of the DA, a copy of the conditions, and then I add an extra column and I go, how did I comply? And it sometimes it's just a couple of sentences, other times it's here's a photo, other times it's please refer to the attached appendix, where I've got the appropriate certificate that actually proves that. But basically I give them one document that actually says, this is the condition you asked for, this is how I actually met that, and here's the proof. Okay, now the ones that catch people out, are probably the NBN certificates. They take forever to get. The the electricity provider in your particular area, that retailer will sometimes take quite some time to do. And also your sewer and stormwater connection points. They're the ones that tend to be the ones that take the most amount of time and effort in order to get connection certificates for. So go and get that stuff out of the way. NBN in particular can take anywhere up to 6 months to get the certificate. So don't leave it until you are at peak debt to actually start the process. Hope that helps. Next question comes from Grace. Grace says, to get quotes from builders, what would be the most important 3 questions to ask? And what documents would you provide to the builders for these quotes? Thanks in advance. More than welcome. So what to provide? So you should put together a proper tender pack, Grace, okay? So that is a pack that has all the information that you need, that the builder needs in order to assess the deal. So you want to put together, I guess, not just your development approval conditions, but also your building approval conditions, or construction certificate, depending upon the state that you're in. You're going to put all of that, the engineering level details, the soil samples, all of that. You're going to put together the fixtures and fittings. So what are the taps, what are the tiles, all that. You want to put all of that information together and give that to the builder so that all the builders know exactly what they're actually referencing, okay? Now, in doing so, you're going to, as part of that, you're going to say, this is my scope of works. The scope of works is I want you to start from X position. So do I want you to, take on, I've done the demolition and you're going to take it on, or I've done the civil works and you're going to continue from there, or do you want them to do everything? So you've got to define what it is that you actually want in and out of scope. At the end, you want them hand back the keys with a house, but no floor in there. Do you want the maybe no driveway, maybe no letterbox, or do you want what they call a turnkey solution where it's everything, including the grass in the back and some trees and some shrubbery and all that sort of stuff? Be very, very clear on that scope of works, exactly what it is that you're actually asking for. Equally, hence your questions, what are you looking for in their response? Well, what you're looking for is that they've actually met the scope of work. So when they give you a submission, go straight to what is out of scope, okay? So when they say this is the element that's out of scope, you go, oh, I missed that, okay? Maybe that's something I should have clarified to all 3 of them. Now, sometimes you'll get the same out of scope feedback from all 3. Other times you won't, which means that one builder was happy to build that into their scope and the other one wasn't. Wonder why that is. You need to understand the individual element that they're actually referring to. So that's the first part, have a clear scope of works. Then ask for a detailed breakdown of costs per trade. So how much for the brickie, how much for the concreter, how much for the electrician, how much for the carpenter, all those sorts of things, break it down trade by trade. That way you can compare, I guess, builder to builder to go, well, why is the brickie over here, $2.50 per brick, and over here is $1.50 per brick? What's actually going on? You're gonna understand where they've built fat into particular areas, and that's going to give you an opportunity to have a much better conversation by going, hey, I can see one guy's too high and one guy's too low. What am I missing? Okay. So they're the kinds of things that I'd be looking for. So have a clear scope of works, ask for a detailed breakdown, and clearly understand, I guess, what is not in scope. So hoping that helps, May. Next one, Martin says, How does a developer get bank servicing? I have a duplex development in Central Coast of New South Wales, finishing up early next year. This will be profit which will be shared 50-50 with a business partner. The property is held in a trust, which may make a distribution to my own personal family trust. When the family trust makes a distribution to me in my own name, will the banks use this for servicing or not? What if I sell one unit? Okay, mate, what you're asking for here is some very clear, accounting and legal advice, which I'm not allowed to do, unfortunately. So I can't give you advice on your own personal circumstances. What I can give you is, just a broad spectrum educational element that will give you the ability to go and ask a much better question of your accountant and your solicitor. Okay, so the first things first, you're clearly trying to use residential lending. Okay, so residential lending is going to look at your serviceability, whereas commercial lending looks at the deal itself. Okay, so if you're using residential lending, that serviceability element is certainly important, but doesn't necessarily mean to be you, the individual, that gets the servicing. So you might have some form of bucket entity that is collecting the cash, and that bucket entity is able to repurpose that, okay, from an investment perspective. Be very careful with, a structure like that. There are a couple of different ways you can put that bucket entity in place. It could be a company, it could be a trust, it could be a trust with a corporate trustee. It could be a combination of those two together. Okay, so I'm just going to loosely call it a bucket entity. So you would distribute down to the bucket entity, which would then give you flexibility on where the proceeds actually got given. So would it be you? Would it be your wife? Would it be, your elder children? Those sorts of things. Okay, so it gives you some flexibility in how you actually exit that out. Now, it is that bucket entity or the ultimate collector of cash, whichever is which is going to be the one that's deemed to be from a servicing position. Now, as an example, okay, I pay myself a minimal wage, very, very, very little, because I don't need a lot. All I need is to put food on the table, okay, put some fuel in the car, those sorts of things. But once you've owned your assets outright, you don't need a huge amount of serviceability for that. Now, if your intention is to keep the property, serviceability is super important. If your intention is to flip the property, you might want to consider whether or not, a more development commercial-based lender and product might be a little bit more relevant to your particular needs. Okay. Otherwise, the bank's going to assess you on, can you afford to hold that property for 20 or 30 years, which means you also need to do a rental appraisal on what that finished product is actually going to look for. So lots that goes into that, Martin. So anyway, I hope that's kind of pointed you in the right direction. Okay, next one, Sam. Sam says, wondering if anyone has any experience with building rooming accommodation and converting a 1A to a 1B dwelling after it was already completed. Sam, look, I've got a number of rooming accommodation properties myself, so I can talk to this with a little bit of authority, but it is not my specialty, but I guess there's enough information in here that I might actually be dangerous. Firstly, a 1A building is classified by the National Construction Code that is intended for one family to actually live in. Whereas a 1B dwelling is where there are two or more, households within there. Typically, that's triggered by the fact that there's more than one lease on the property. So that means that there are many households actually living there. Now, a 1B dwelling can have a maximum of 12 occupants, according to the National Construction Code. That may be modified based on the local planning authority. Local planning authority might, in some instances, say 9, and in other instances, say 5. So whilst the National Construction Code says 12, it is the lowest common denominator that's going to win. So where are you actually doing this dwelling? Now, in order to convert that, you need to comply with 1B. Now, 1B, because there are multiple households in there, then it's wanting to be, firstly, more inclusive to actually make sure that people with some form of disability are not disadvantaged in being able to get onto the rental market. And also, because more people are living in the property, fire compliance starts to become super important. So when you look at the conversion from a 1A to a 1B, it is those two elements that you need to consider the most. So for the disability access, you may need to widen doorways in order to make sure that wheelchairs can get in. You may need to make sure there's enough room to maneuver a wheelchair around the kitchen, and definitely the laundry area, one bathroom and one bedroom. So long as somebody with disability can actually get into all of those common areas, then the rest of the dwelling doesn't need to have all those wide openings, etc. So now from a fire compliance perspective, you're going to need to make sure that you've got emergency lighting, specific kind of door handles. That means if there is smoke and you're reaching up in the dark, you can open the door handle without too much trouble, and a whole bunch more. So in order to do that, you're going to need a building certifier to review, I guess, what modifications are needing to be done to go from one to the other. If it's a second-hand property, then that might be the opportunity for the building certifier to say this, to go and say, hey, the rest of the building's not up to code in a whole bunch of other ways. So for example, maybe it's not fire compliant, maybe it's too close to bushfire, maybe there's a few other elements like that where they say, or maybe the electrical standards and the electrical switchboard hasn't been upgraded for a whole bunch of time. So it's their opportunity to say, we're going to clean this property up and get it to a point where it is safe for someone to actually move into. Anyway, hope that helps, Sam. Next one, Joel. Joel says, we're newbies, have never built before. Lots of knockdown rebuilds happening in and around our area. So we're looking to do this for a principal place of residence in the Brisbane area. And he's named some suburbs, but I won't name the suburbs. Okay. I want to see if the deal would actually stack up financially before pursuing further with plans, etc. Now, this is quite a long question. So I'm going to see if I can break it down. I've seen a wide range of build costs quoted I guess from a low point, I guess all the way up to a super high point. And I guess it's profitable at a low point, but not profitable at a high point. So that would be cutting it fine. So need to understand what would be a fair and reasonable estimate to understand what the build cost it would be for the area. Okay, so firstly, the first thing I'm going to say is you need to do some sales research. So what is the typical raw site selling for in the area? So that is not just, hey, is it developable, but what's the intrinsic value of the property? So if there's too much intrinsic value already, somebody's already renovated, it's already a brand new home, those sorts of things, people are going to pay a premium for that, but they won't pay for the old shitty, they won't pay a premium for the old and shitty ones, for the knockdowns and that sort of thing. So you want to understand what the comparable raw site would actually be worth. Then you want to understand what is the finished product that's selling in the area. You said that you're seeing lots of people do these. Go and have a look at what the standard is of those. Go understand which builders actually built those particular standards and go talk to those particular builders, okay? Now, in many instances, you can find that even though the house is finished, there's a little trick with Google Street View where you can actually roll back in time. The Google Street View goes around all the time and captures new versions of things. The satellite view catches new versions of things, and you can actually roll back and say, show me 3 months ago, show me 6 months ago. And quite often, as it's driving past, it will show the builder's, I guess, safety sign out the front with the builder's name and the builder's license and the builder's phone number on it. So that's how you find out which builder actually built the property. Now, no guarantee you're going to find all the builders in doing that, but you should get a fairly good chance in doing that. The other thing you could do is look up the development application and see which architect. The architect might be able to give you some insights as to which builder was actually engaged to do the construct. So go talk to those guys, because they are the ones who are building the exact stock in the exact area that you're actually looking for. And they're going to say, well, for that product, this was the cost then, and because of any market fluctuations, this would be for the exact same house, this would be the price point for that. Oh, that was a fairly big response. Anyway, hope that helps, Joel. So folks, there you have it. That's another Sunday session wrapped up. If you would like to submit a question for next month, click on the link below. So propertydev.info/open mic. Otherwise, we run these Sunday sessions every Sunday of the the year, give or take, with some minor exceptions. But these open mic nights are the first Sunday of every month. We also run events all the way around the country where you can physically turn up in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. And we also live stream those all the way around the country. So if you would love to come, and get some more timely feedback, get engaged with the community that are actually actively doing deals and that sort of thing, make sure you come to one of our upcoming meetups, folks. Until then, I'm going to say it's been a pleasure, and bye for now. Bye.